an interesting fellow, and he and the fellow who was in my class, Howard Slater, who was the reason I went to Rivercoff and Kotkin in the first place, decided one day, they sat me down quite literally and told me, they didn't think that a black lawyer could make it as a commercial lawyer in Hartford, or I think it was Hartford. I don't think they said Connecticut. I'm not sure that if you could make it in Hartford, you could, whether you could make it in Fairfield County, but I didn't ever practice there. But that's what they said, just as clean and neat as that, and gave me the opportunity to leave by whenever it was in 1983, 84. And came the new year, I had no place to go. So I spent some time wandering around D.C. and going to the White House. It was lovely going to the White House. Until Coleman Levy called me up and said, I understand you're looking for a job. And 19 years later, I left his employ.
So were you bitter about that?
Not as bitter as I should have been, because I made them the big case, the Mr. Vetrano case. They paid me for 3 years from the $5 million judgment. So they had to pay for my silence, I suppose. And I didn't have a witness to anything that they said as stupid as it was. But they paid for having, because then I was making a salary at this other firm and they were paying me every month. So it was okay.
Before we went on the record, you told a story about something that happened when you were a waiter while in law school.
Yes. Interesting story, as I mentioned at that point in my life, and I don't know that Yale still doesn't do it, probably not, I would guess, but there were waiters who were students, typically grad students from the art and architecture school and from the law school. We waited table, and the ideal time to wait was breakfast, because you waited a very short amount of time. You had the rest of the day in front of you, and you went to class and did whatever you did. So I was the waiter for breakfast at the law school, and I would live way out Elm Street, almost out at Yale Bowl. I rode a bike in every morning and a bike home every night. And this one morning I came in, and it was breakfast ended at 8 o'clock. I always had 8 o'clock classes. 8:10 you had to be in your seat. So I would clean up my tables, gobble up my breakfast, sprint to class, and let the day work its way out. This young man, I want to say his first name was Bartholomew, Bart Tiernan maybe. I'm not sure of that. I know Tiernan is his last name. Walked in at 8:02, 8:03, and he sat at one of my tables, and I went over to him, and he started telling, and he told me things like, I've been waiting to get my breakfast. And I said, you just got here, and you're late. I didn't know him, and I wasn't particularly interested in knowing him at that point, because I was interested in getting to class and getting my own breakfast. I asked him what he wanted. He ordered, and I left and went into the kitchen. You go in one door, pick up the food, you come out the other door, and he's standing in the doorway with his books in his right hand. I'm wearing my glasses. I have a plate of his breakfast in this hand and a glass of orange juice in this hand. And he said to me, I stopped throwing rocks at peasants a long time ago. And I raised my elbow to go by him and probably cursed him on my way out. He dropped his books and went right over the top and hit me right on this tooth right here, blew it out of we never found the tooth. I don't know, I swallowed it, but I went back into a giant pile of dishes right out of a movie. Exploded that, and I went at him. He was way bigger than I was. Probably a bad idea. But a bunch of people who were still in the dining room separated us, and he went on his way, and I stood there with this big hole in my face, trying to decide what else I was going to do that day. I got a call later that morning from the dean. I'm not sure who the dean was back then, telling me that Mr. Tiernan was in his office. He had broken down, and he was contrite, and he wanted me to know that the law school, the university, would take care of my medical bills, my dental bills, but they didn't want me to sue. And I said, I'm going to sue that bastard for everything he's worth. And I went to Richard Jacobs. Dickie was somebody that I'd known not well, but well enough for a long time. I don't know if Leander had started there yet. I don't think so. And I presented my case. He took it, and we settled the case. And I don't know, several months later for $10,000. So it was an expensive punch that he threw that day. That foolish young man, who I trust has become a better human being over time.
John?
I was interested, I'm a professional librarian. I was I started as I was a law librarian for 33 years with the state. We probably may have interacted at some points. I started working for Marty Sullivan back in 76, and I was there from 79, and then went on to the Stanford Courthouse Law Library, which was very lucky because everything exploded and the library went upstairs and I went with it, so that was all good stuff. But I was interested on, you were talking about your youth and what seems to have been a quite determinative and decisive influence of the public library on your mother and your growth. And this I find very interesting.
I grew up in a house with 14 people in it. It had 4 rooms. We didn't have indoor toilets till I was 9. We didn't have electricity in the house till I was 10 on Cape Cod. So when I wanted to get work done after school, I went to the library.
Yeah.
And I did my work there, and the librarians were lovely people. It was very close to the high school. There was a big pond. You walked around the pond, and you were at the I'm not sure if you've ever been in Falmouth. It's a gorgeous library.
I have been, actually. My brother actually had rented a place there for on and off for 2 or 3 years. He used to go up and stay.
And even as a little kid, I liked books. I read everything that I get my hands on back then, and I read adventure stuff. I mean, I had a comic book collection that if I still had it, I could retire.
Well, there are people who collect them.
I
mean, if you're good enough at it, you can earn a fortune.
I would exchange boxes of comic books with other people, literally. I mean, if I didn't have the first edition of Tarzan, I'd be shocked. Because
You still have it?
no, hell no. All that stuff is gone,
You could
unfortunately.
retire very
Yeah, like I said, I could retire. But if this is truly an aside, there was all the Tarzan comic books in that era had a tiny little story at the end of every one of the comic books about a black warrior man and a white warrior man, and they would tell these little stories. So you had to get the book every month because you had to keep up with their story, which was an ongoing event. But every Archie book, every Batman magazine, every comic book, I learned to read at age 3, sitting on my father's lap, reading comics and the sports page. My father he went to the 8th grade, but he could do my algebra when I was in the 9th grade. He wasn't a reader like my mother, but he was a very smart man. And, he grew up in a family. Both my parents lost both their parents by the time they were 10. So they were raised by people who already had families, and they were kind of like the adjunct children. So they were very hardworking, good people. My father had an interesting reputation. He could grow anything. He could grow. I mean, literally, a plant would spring out of the table, and so he grew flowers. And he used to take me on when he would sell fruits and vegetables. I'd go with him, and we'd go to these beautiful neighborhoods on the Cape, and he would greet all these people. My father was very charming. And he had to be, when you're a salesperson trying to make your way and you've just been up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go pick up the fresh fruit and vegetables to deliver to these people in the giant houses. He also did landscaping work, and I learned a lot from him about landscaping too. There was a time when I could literally take a burlap bag and a couple of nails, wrap it around the ball of a tree, and take the tree So a lesson you learn from people who know how to do those things. But growing up was interesting. We were dirt poor, but we had a lot of love and family. So Falmouth was interesting to me. And I spent a lot of time, especially at this stage of my life, with all kinds of people looking at me and thinking, oh, you have a house in Hartford and you have an apartment in New Haven. I have to have an apartment in New Haven because of residence requirements. So you must be successful. You have a daughter who's, let's see, she's on the Academy Award nominations list now. She just got appointed to that. And she's been nominated for an Emmy for her Roots performance. So you must be successful. So you have no idea of my roots. You know, if you want to get down and dirty, fine, let's go. Let's see what you haven't got or what you had to get through to get where you got, and I'll tell you how I did, what I had to get through to get where I got. So it's been an interesting life, and I loved my childhood. Everybody had huge families. There were 2 families in Falmouth with 22 children each, all single births. These were Cape Verdean Portuguese and regular white Portuguese. We call them a Portuguese phrase, which doesn't describes what they were, but doesn't tell you very much. We were Creole. Would be like the people of color in New Orleans, Creole. But the white Portuguese were called Nhambabs, which is a different world. And we all grew up together, and as I said, one high school, Mashpee, Wampanoag Indians, to the very wealthiest people who lived in Falmouth Heights who owned the big beautiful buildings out on the ocean, to the people from T-Ticket with 22 kids or 12. It was an interesting growth experience.
But the public library was,
It was
as it is now for inner city
Mm-hmm.
kids, you know, and in fact, I mean, since retirement, I've been working a lot to help the law libraries, but that segued over to working with the Connecticut Library Association and there's a lot of cross back and forth with like libraries and access to justice now. But the thing is that really the library for many people is, I was going to say, the university of first resort. I mean, in a way, I mean, it's the way so many people get started,
right.
You know. And Siobhan, I think, was telling me how somehow the libraries, the New Haven Public Library, got funding to extend its hours this summer for the young people. Which I was just at a meeting of the Connecticut Library Association Legislative Committee. I'm their recording secretary. And we were going through all the things, well, that they had done, not only the libraries, obviously, which is but, you know, to Department of Children and Families and these budget cuts. And it's nice to see a positive story.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
The city of New Haven stepped in and said, okay, they stepped up to the plate.
I don't know how many branches there are in New Haven, but every child ought to be exposed to a library, because it was one of those wonderful lines I read recently: teach a child to read and he'll read for life. And I still have 2 or 3 books going every day that I go home to, and I read the best newspapers that I can find. I got on a train recently and picked up the Wall Street Journal. I hadn't read. It's a fabulous newspaper.
It is. And one of the things is, in recent times, the upgrade in the culturals, you know, the book reviews, the art, the, you know, all of these things. I mean, obviously, you know, they have the position in finance, but they really branched out.
It's a good newspaper.
Good writing.
Yeah,
really
good writing. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure.
Okay.
And I forgive you for taking me away from the Germany and France soccer game. Soccer's my probably my first love, sports-wise, because as a Cape Verdean kid, I grew up with a soccer ball. You know, it's the sport you learn first. And